All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing a book that has been a long time in the coming. I've wanted to review this a long time ago. I've wanted to review this whole series for quite some time, but these books are huge. It's a trilogy of books. It's Neal Stephenson's Baroque cycle, and we're going to start with book #1, Quicksilver. Each book is about 1,000 pages, and it's one of my favorite series of books of all time. We've got book #2 up here, The Confusion, and then we've got book #3, The System of the World, and all three of them together just look really cool. So since we're talking about the aesthetics of the book first, let's just go ahead and talk about these covers. Don't those look gorgeous? Just sitting there together. And then all three of them together, just make up a great set of books. We'll put these two back over here and just talk about book #1. Came out about 20 some odd years ago, this series. I remember it was released, literally all three books were released at the same time. You'd walk into the Barnes & Noble and you'd have all three of them just right, the big display of them. It was just incredible. And I was a fan of Neal Stephenson from his Cryptonomicon. Now these books are tied to Cryptonomicon, which is right here. One of my favorite books of all time, Cryptonomicon. This is the prequel to this trilogy. So Cryptonomicon is sort of the prequel. Well, actually, it might be the sequel. I think it's the prequel and sequel to this. Because this takes place in 1940, during World War II. And this takes place during, the 1600s. Anyway. Let's get into this. So there's more. The cover is great. We've talked about that. But there's all sorts of great maps in this book. There are so many different maps. I'd say there's probably 10 or 12 different maps in this book total. And each one of them is detailed and cool. And there's a lot of great things going on. I mean, there's like charts of family lineages. And all of this will make sense in a minute when I tell you what the book's about. Each one of the chapter headings is just good. It's got just a great style to it. And so let's talk about this book. What's it about? God, I don't even know how to explain what this trilogy is about. That's why I was really nervous. This is probably the most nervous I've been doing a book review, just because these books are so incredibly well done and full of so much information that I don't think a review by a moron like myself can do them justice. But I'm going to try to muddle through it. So the book, this book, and all the books, but this book in particular, starts out in 16. It jumps in time back and forth so much between like 1645 and like 1720. So it just jumps back. And every other chapter you're jumping back and forth. If that bothers you, that's going to bother you. And a lot of times that bothers me in a story. It didn't in this, just because the story was so engaging and the writing is so brilliant and beautiful. And you learn so much about history and science that I just couldn't take and the writing is so, I already mentioned that. But okay, so the story takes place between 1645-ish and 1725-ish. And it jumps back and forth a lot in time. But we open up in 1713 in Boston Commons with an execution. Really reminded me of the opening to Pillars of the Earth, where there's an execution. And it seems like this book is broken up into 3 chunks, and each sort of transition, we get an execution scene of some sort. It's interesting. I don't know what the theme of that is or what the allegory is, but anyway, there's a lot of allegory and themes in this book. So there's Enoch, is one of our main characters. Enoch, Daniel Waterhouse, Jack Shafto, and the girl, what's her name? Can't remember the name right now. Main character, can't remember her name. Anyway, there's a bunch of main characters. Oh, and this is why I was nervous about doing this review. Because there's so much things going on in it. So much. Okay, so Enoch and finds a young Benjamin Franklin. And there's a lot of discussion in the early 315 pages of this book about the Royal Society. Enoch also discovers a plucky little Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton and this Royal Society, they're involved in like the Cryptonomicon. One of their members is writing the Cryptonomicon, which is a big, well, like I showed you that book. There's Daniel Waterhouse as part of the secret societies. And they just talk about philosophy and history and science and the future and the past. They do experiments on prisms, and there's a lot of acting involved. There's like troops of actors. There's dogs. They discuss what would happen if you took a dog's head and mounted it onto a lion's body, or vice versa, or the dog, put this dog's head on this other dog. They do a lot of, they talk about telescopes, snowflakes. They go deep into the snowflakes, like why are snowflakes the way they are? And this Neal Stephenson writes so many pages on just all of these different subjects that you just get involved in learning new things about these subjects, and what a lot of this science might have looked like to people that lived 300-400 years ago. In fact, there's a scene where young Isaac Newton is experimenting with poking needles into the eyes of different animals, because they don't know if are they just going to pop? Are they going to what happens if you poke needles into eyes of different animals? What's going to be the result? And I'm glad that someone at some point experimented with this before they did it to me, because if you followed my channel for any length of time, you know that I've got an eye disease where I have to get injections of medicine into both of my eyes every couple of months just so I can see. And I'm glad I wasn't the guinea pig for that experiment. Like, we gonna stick a needle in your eye, Durfee, but we don't know what's gonna happen. Might pop your eyeball, might just like a balloon, let all the air out of it. We didn't know. But no, people like Isaac Newton sussed all this out hundreds of years ago. Turns out that you can poke a needle in your eye every couple months for your entire life, and you're gonna be all right. You're gonna be all right. I know. It happens to me anyway. So, for the first 350 some odd pages, you're talking a lot about philosophy and a lot about all these subjects, a lot about the Cryptonomicon. There's a lot of letters that get written back and forth from these key people. There's a lot of scenes where there's actors acting things out. All of this probably doesn't make sense. You just have to read it. The story really does pick up the pace, though, and it's 1,000 pages, and then the next one's 1,000 pages, and this one's 1,000 pages. But it is an action-adventure story, I promise you. And the story really picks up its pace with the introduction of another one of the main characters, is Jack Shafto. And Jack and his two brothers, they are kicked out at a young age they're kicked out of their home, and they just become street urchins in London, just learning how to thieve and do things like that. Jack Shafto grows up to become known as the king of the vagabonds. And he had a youthful sort of existence that sort of, that's why he's the king of the vagabonds. He was a street urchin. I mean, his whole life is just an adventure of stealing and different things. But I am doing such a horse shit job of describing this book, because it's indescribable. And if you've read it, I read this over the Christmas break. I had about a week and a half to read it, and so I was reading about 100 pages a day as I was reading other books. So I was really taking it slow. And if you think Malazan Book of the Fallen is a densely written, hard story to follow, That's got nothing on this. That's got nothing on this. Let me read the back jacket just so you get a pretty clear idea of what this is about, because I probably left you thinking that you don't know what the fuck it's about. Okay, so here we go. Neal Stephen's Quicksilver, a monumental literary feat that follows the author's critically acclaimed bestseller Cryptonomicon. Yes, these 3 books are set in the same world as Cryptonomicon. It is history, adventure, science, truth, invention, sex, absurdity, piracy, madness, death, and alchemy. It sweeps across continents and decades with the power of a roaring tornado, upending kings, armies, religious beliefs, and all expectations. It is the story of Daniel Waterhouse, fearless thinker and conflicted Puritan, pursuing knowledge in the company of the greatest minds of Baroque-era Europe. In a chaotic world where reason wars with the bloody ambitions of the mighty, and where catastrophe, natural or otherwise, can alter the political landscape overnight. It is a chronicle of the breathtaking exploits of half-cocked Jack Shafto, London street urchin turned swashbuckling adventurer and legendary king of the vagabonds, risking life and limb for fortune and love while slowly maddening from the pox. And Eliza, that was her name, Eliza. Eliza, rescued by Jack from a Turkish harem to become spy, confidant, and pawn of royals in order to reinvent a contentious continent through the newborn power of finance. A gloriously rich, entertaining, and endlessly inventive novel that brings a remarkable age and its momentous events to vivid life. An historical epic populated by the likes of Samuel Pepys, Isaac Newton, William of Orange, Benjamin Franklin, and King Louis the 8th, 9th, or 10th. I don't know Roman numerals, folks. Quicksilver is an extraordinary achievement from one of the most original and important literary talents of our time. And it's just the beginning of a trilogy. This defies description. It defies even a book review on YouTube. You just have to read it to understand it. And I thought that the jacket did a really good job of encapsulating how epic the story is and how adventurous and innovative it is. I feel like when I'm reading this, that it was written by someone who lived in that time. I feel like it was written by a guy with a quill and ink, and it was taking his time to dip the quill in the ink and write it out by hand on parchment, on ancient parchment. That's the atmosphere that permeates this book and the trilogy as a whole. So anyway, that was my best attempt at muddling through a really difficult book to review. I hope if you've watched this long, please drop a note saying, you did all right, or Durf, man, that review fucking sucked. Okay, so anyway, Quicksilver, 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10, sheer brilliance, absolutely 100% certified dope.